far as I know, we did.
Oh, they kept changing his. He's ended up there.
Your seat so we can get started in a timely manner.
Let me go sit down.
Hey, man, how are you doing? Okay.
I'm gonna sit up here.
Oh, well, then you go. I'm all set.
I'd rather sit out here with you.
I'm all set.
Stay. We did. Pull some of them back up here. Yes. It's fun,
Let's call the meeting to order, please. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Madam Chairman,
Here.
Senator Allen. Here. Baker, Brown, Chambliss, Chasteen, Elliott, Ellis, Gavan, Grimsley, Hall, Marsh, Lawrence, McCampbell, Orr, Rich, Schofield, Sells, Sessions, Shaver,
Here.
Shedd, Singleton, Smitherman, Wagner, Price, and Wingo. Madam Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Welcome to the
All
Joint
here.
Transportation Committee. Oh, did I hear somebody on Zoom say they're here?
Hall.
We got you, Ms. Hall. Thank you, Representative Hall. Thank you. We have a jam-packed meeting today, a lot of good news and a lot of reports. So first I need to, if anybody received the minutes of the meeting of the prior meeting, I need a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Minutes are approved. We have committee, subcommittee reports, policies and procedures. I'm recognizing Senator David Sessions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had our subcommittee was Thursday, August 11th in room 402. I called to order. Ms. Tynes clerked the meeting, and we did have a quorum there. So we've got our report is kind of as follows. Representative McCampbell brought up the issue of continuity within our committee. And so out of that, we had good discussion, and Senator Chambliss made the recommendation, and Representative Sales seconded that we have Yvonne Jackson be the clerk full-time for the committee, although committee chairs will swap from Senate to House and House to Senate every other year, that we felt that one clerk would be advantageous for continuity of flow, and the committee was unanimous in that mindset that would create some continuity. And Madam Chair, we bring that as a recommendation from the subcommittee, and we would like for the entire committee to entertain that.
Thank you for the report, Senator Sessions. Do we have
Madam
any?
Chair,
You're recognized, sir.
I make the motion that we adopt the report from the committee as reported.
We have a motion and a second. Does anybody have any questions before we take a vote? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the recommendation of the Subcommittee of Policy and Procedures has been adopted. Thank you so much for the committee's hard work. Thank you for the report, Senator Session.
Thank you.
Now I'm pleased to introduce John Driscoll, the Director and CEO of the Alabama Port Authority. And just in case anybody needs additional agendas, they're on the podium, or if anybody needs extra copies. Mr. Driscoll, we're pleased that you're here. We're pleased in the investment that the state of Alabama has made, and we're so anxious to hear the return on our investment.
Great. Thank you,
You
Chairman.
have the floor.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's really an honor for the port to be here, your port of Alabama to be here to make this presentation to you here today. The picture up on the screen is really the upper harbor of the Alabama State Port Authority. We call it the main docks, and it's really the traditional areas that used to handle cotton, bananas, break bulk kind of commodities. But there's a lot more going on at your port now. But we've really been able to adapt, I think, very well over the course of the last 2 years. There's been a lot of press and things that has happened relative to transportation, the supply chain. But the port has been a fluid, very active port, moving cargo in a fluid manner for our customers. So I think we're very, very proud of that. It's something that one of the reasons why we've had a tremendous amount of success here over the course of the last several years is people want to do business through the Alabama's only deep water seaport. I want to start with some really great news. We just announced Monday of this week we had done a 2021 economic study, impact study for the Port Authority. The last one we had done was 2019, and then prior to that was 2016. But the numbers that were produced were really fantastic. If you look at just the overall numbers associated with the total economic values in the state, value of the port to the state, it exceeds $85 billion. That's a $53 billion increase over the course of just a 2-year period. So it's really a tremendous increase to what we've had. But both state and federal investments are what we think really paying off, and you're seeing that in some of these numbers. I mean, some of what the legislature has done for the port over the course of the last several years is really, you're starting to see some of those. These numbers don't include any of the investments that we're making here from this point forward. This is really in 2021 numbers. If you look, one thing that I'm exceptionally proud of is the jobs that we are accountable for through our activities. These are what we consider some of the jobs that are generated by the port activity. You know, this covers direct, indirect, related jobs in the state of Alabama, but it's almost doubled. It's just shy of 313,000 jobs. That's about 14% of what the people employed in our state are somehow impacted or employed through what the activities that we do. So that number has, again, almost doubled in the course of just a 2-year period. And then the economic impact related to the state and local tax activities. This is another self-explanatory one, but it's the way that they measure it on these reports: direct, induced, and indirect tax revenue. It's just over $2 billion in 2021. So there is really significant economic impact that the state, your port in Lower Alabama, really is investing and doing things to help the businesses and the communities and the people that live in our state in a lot of different manners. So we're very, very proud of all 3 of these. One thing that Congresswoman asked, the chairwoman asked us to look at is give you a little bit of update on some of the investments that we're doing. And I can tell you there's a lot of things that are happening at the port, a lot of investments that are going on, certainly. I'll talk a little bit about the harbor deepening and widening project that these bodies helped us, are helping us fund that through the federal government as well. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the Montgomery ICTF. It's an intermodal container transfer facility, and then the container operations that we're investing heavily in. So the first one is really the harbor deepening and widening. This was really a generational investment that we're making. The state is making, the federal government is making. It's a $366 million estimated project. The good news, it's on time and under budget currently. They've done really 2 phases of the dredging. It's a 7-phased construction site. It started at the lower, the mouth of the harbor, if you see on the picture there, at the southern end of the entrance to the bay there. The state has committed, as you know, about $150 million, up to $150 million. Currently, we've transferred the $38.65 million to the Army Corps of Engineers, who's the body that's conducting the funding for that. So this project, they've done 2 phases of the 7 are completed. The third phase has been awarded, and it's about 9% complete. So it's really moving forward. The work started back in the summer of last year, and it should be completed by the first quarter of 2025. So the reason that this is so transformational is because it's going to allow the larger ships, the bigger ships, to come to the port. We're currently at 45 feet of water. This will allow us to get to 50 feet plus after the widening and the deepening is completed. So we'll be able to handle really larger ships. So customers will be able to put more cargo on the vessels, whether it's coal exporting out of McDuffie Terminal or containers coming in and out with forest products or steel products that we have. So this is something that once you have this type of depth and the carriers start utilizing it, it's really going to just only increase. And I think some of those economic numbers that you saw earlier were the result of people seeing this. It's not done yet. It's not completed. We can't handle these ships that are that big, but people are seeing that the state of Alabama is making these kind of investments for the future. So people want to be on the ground floor. So I think you're seeing a lot of this because of this tremendous investment. And really, I think a really warm thank you for all that really helped with the Rebuild Alabama Act that you were able to put, and it's helping invest this and putting in the 25% that the state needs to be in. But this is a really important project, certainly for the port, for our customers, and for the businesses. It will attract new businesses through our gateway. So it just gives you a few numbers that we have, what it is, and I talked about most of those. One project that we really saw was really important for freight transportation was this Montgomery Intermodal Container Transfer Facility, ICTF. It's really interesting. So currently, the port has 9 railroads that call through the port, 5 Class 1 railroads. Class 1 railroads are the largest railroads in the United States. There's only 7 that operate in the entire United States, so 5 of them touch our port, your port, through Mobile. So the important part of this is that we currently don't have any rail service, intermodal rail service, within our state. So all of the intermodal activities that we have that's been booming is going to places like Memphis, Tennessee, and primarily Chicago. So we're handling business through our gateway in and out, but we don't have any intermodal activities within our state. So what this is going to be the first venture for us in Montgomery. It's really the core customer is Hyundai. It's an automobile manufacturing company and the OEMs that support that business. This will be, this is fully funded, federal monies, some of the, this 2022 federal budget money that we're going to be using to help build this facility. The port is contributing 20% of our capital towards this. This is about a $74 million project. It's a very expensive idea. We purchased the land already, and we're going through the federal EPA and regulations that you need to go through. But this is going to be fully operational, we expect, by 2025. But this is really important to take some of the trucks off of the road. As we're growing, you have more truck activity, but this is going to be very helpful to try to convert some of that truck traffic, that container truck traffic, and put it onto the railroads. And we see this really as the first venture going up through our state, right? We have all of these railroads. CSX has been the really good partner with us. The hardest part of this was really getting some of the railroads to get on board with us, and they've been really a good partner working with us, and they're going to offer a very good service out of your port in southern Alabama. So this is really a game changer. This is going to be really the first one that I see we'd like to get. The next stop would be in the Birmingham area, and then we would like to do a similar type of new facility up in northern Alabama as well. And basically, it's to support all the different businesses, export customers, whether it's forest products or finished goods, and import businesses for the manufacturing of goods and services, and retail activities that we have throughout the state. So this is really the first step, the way I look at it. It's a real commitment to extending our intermodal capabilities throughout the state. And then finally, as far as investments, and these are by no means all of the investments that we're doing, but the container terminal is something that has really driven a lot of the economic value that you saw before. This container facility is the fastest growing container facility in the United States for the past 5 years. Now, we're relatively small. We're not any huge facility like in Southern California or even some ports on the East Coast, but it's a very viable, really efficient type of operation that we have. Some of the productivity numbers that these people do is really fantastic, really the best in the Gulf Coast. So we're basically going to phase 4 development on this. We've already done 3 phases. We've invested about $550 million already in this project. This fourth phase, excuse me, is about a 32-acre development. There'll be 2 new gantry cranes that will come in that the terminal operator, APMT, will be bringing in. And this will give us the ability to handle about 50% more capacity that we have now. Last year, we handled 500,000, what they call 20-foot equivalent units, for lack of a better term. Those containers that you see there is the measurement that they do. And this will allow us, once the phase 4 is completed, and this is fully funded as well, it'll give us a little over 1 million TEUs. We'll be able to double the capacity that we currently have.
Stop you for a question.
Yes, you can.
I know that in one of your most recent expansion, you're going vertical with your storage, but how much land is available to expand the container port around it?
Direct container facilities on the north, we're not necessarily going up. We're going actually 32 acres. We're expanding on this phase 4 project. We can go on the southern portion. It's probably another 35 to 38 acres. And that's what we would consider phase 5, which we don't have, we just have in our minds at this stage. So I think that's probably 5 to 10 years out that we'd need to do that.
So you're not going to where you can stack containers
We
vertically?
will. We will be doing that. We would probably do that. The operator would be the one that does that, right, APMT, and be able to use that land more efficiently, which is exactly what they plan to do after this next expansion that we're working on right now.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. So, we can't talk about the port without talking about the coal that we handle through our facility. And the Alabama coal activity is really going through a major change. Historically, the McDuffie Terminal is where this is handled. This is a picture of. Historically had handled predominantly import coal, thermal coal from Colombia, South America, for utilization in electrification for the electric plants to power those plants around the state and nearby states. That's all going through a change, right? A lot of those plants are converting or have converted over to natural gas. So the importation of coal, we expected, should be ceasing here probably next year. There's some talk that it might go a little bit longer than that, but a year and a half ago, some of the current customers that we provide service to said it would probably end by the summer of next year. So that will be gone. But the good news is that we have this incredible product called metallurgical coal that's right here in the ground in our great state. And this is a really high valued, as most of you know, grade of coal that's used in the production of steel. It's a very highly desirable commodity that is used around the world. It's still the preeminent form of power generation and to be able to make steel in an efficient manner. And that business is growing. Our customers are making huge investments in our state, in new mines, new facilities. So we're basically going through and investing significantly in this infrastructure that, candidly, over the years has not. It needs a lot of new investments in these facilities. So last year we invested about $30 million into this activity. This year we've budgeted $44 million to do improvements and efficiencies in equipment and what have you. But we have a lot more to do over the course of the next 5 years to really be able to handle the increase in the export of metallurgical coal that we're expecting. So this is a great story for our state, and we're working with our customers and others to make that a reality. And then finally, I mean, general cargo, we're basically targeting about $130 million to rehabilitate some of the wharves. It's a multi-phase program. We currently have a $60 million grant that we're working on one of the old wharves that dates back to the 20s and 30s. And we need to do this in order to be able to handle the ever larger pieces of equipment that you need to unload these ships that we do on the main docks that I showed you that picture at the beginning. But these are commodities like wood products, steel, roll-on, roll-off products, GE Energy products, cars. We have a new Ro-Ro facility that we haven't moved the first car yet, but just opened up here about a year ago, and we're looking for handling the first car through that facility. But these are investments in some of our more traditional commodities that are handled and are critical to some of the different customers that we have throughout the state. But the thing that we're most proud of is that your port in Alabama really services all 67 counties in one way or the other. And we really want to try to be able to continue to do that and expand that and support the services that are required for moving cargo in and out of our state. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions that anybody may have.
Representative Sells, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Driscoll, I grew up in Mobile, so I know how important the Alabama dock is, not only to the state, but to that area also.
Yes, sir.
And let me tell you, it's changed in the last 40 years. But now, I was by there the other day. Are there actually some ships now that have their own crane system for unloading containers?
There are some of the smaller ships that have to get into some of the smaller ports, like in Central. I don't know which vessel you saw. You probably saw we have a new service that's coming out of Honduras in Guatemala. They have their own shipboard cranes to where they can.
I thought that was
unload. Yeah,
unique. I've never seen
it is. You know, the larger ships don't have that. It's generally these smaller ships that they can go into these ports that are very small, and they'll be able to, basically unload and load the vessels themselves.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate
No, thank you, sir.
Senator Allen, you have the
Yes.
floor.
John, certainly good visit last evening, and a couple weeks ago visited your office and the port, and really learned a lot myself. And in Tuscaloosa County and Walker County and in Jefferson, there's a tremendous amount of reserve coal there that's going to be coming through the ports for many, many years. But one of the things that that I've learned with the visit with you was the fact that you alone cannot always do what you need to do to keep the port facilities, as far as coal concerns, up to date. And I'm asking my colleagues here this afternoon and stay focused on the idea of what we can do to help you. And because it's something that's very important, not only the number of employees that all the coal industry employs is very vital to the state, and to having good quality jobs opportunities. And so I want to thank you for the job that you're doing. And please don't be reluctant to call and come and see us, because we're here to assist you so that you can accomplish your job as well.
Thank you, Senator.
So thank you, John.
No, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. That's very important, right? And like you said, I think this is a team effort that you have to do with. It's we don't have the ability on some of these things to do them as quickly as our customers might need. So I really appreciate those comments, and we will definitely take you up on that, sir. Thank you.
Senator Sessions, you have the floor.
Mr. Driscoll, thank you for being here in that report. Put on my farmer hat. I want to question you about the freezer facility.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, how is the utilization? Are we shipping a lot of poultry out of there, or?
Yes, sir.
Or what's the situation at that?
Yeah, so and for those of you that don't know, we opened a really state-of-the-art, it's not ours, we sold the land to a developer about 3 years ago, and it opened about a year and a half ago. It's a state-of-the-art refrigerated warehouse. It's right next to the container facilities. The people that started this business, really, they were focused on ensuring that you can get refrigerated containers in so we can load them back out with mostly proteins, mostly our poultry coming out of our state and actually surrounding states. I would say as far as utilization of that facility is probably in the 75% utilization, around 75% last time I checked. But the poultry business, which is very, very important to our state, as you know, is using that for quite a bit of their activities, right? Not all of their activities, but quite a bit of what they move. So I think it's been very, very successful. And we do expect they have an option on another piece of property that they're talking about even doubling the capacity of that facility. So we'll see with time, but I would say it's been a tremendous success. And I think our customers, if you ask them in the agricultural sector, would support that. They've used the facility. Thank you.
Senator Chambliss, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today, Mr. Driscoll. The $85 billion impact is just amazing to me, and you mentioned it being all across the state. So I saw that in the news a few days ago, and I wanted to just highlight that for everybody. That's a big, big deal to our state. The question that I had, and you may have said this, but I think I missed it, on the dredging, when is that scheduled to be totally complete?
The first quarter of 2025.
2025.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members wish to be recognized? Not to be the skunk at the garden party, but I know that we've had some hints of a labor strike down there. Could you give us an update on that? I understand it could be a favorable report.
Yes, it is. There was talk of one of the unions they're not employed by the state down there. They operate with one of the stevedores, which are the people that actually operate the vessels offload. We have multiple stevedores. They basically have agreed to meet and try to work out their differences. It's it's a contract that workers have been working 4 years without a new contract. So I think they were trying to push some buttons to try to get something to happen, and hopefully the two parties can come together. So any kind of work stoppage never took place, was averted. So hopefully we can continue to report that and they can settle the
All right, that's good news. And then on the rail strike, I know that we don't have the Rail Association here, but could you give an update on that as well?
Sure, yeah. So the Class 1 railroads, there's 12 different unions that they operate, and the port has 7 unions that we negotiate with, rail unions. Our contracts are not impacted. We negotiated with them a couple of years ago, and we have another year or two, depending on which branch of it is. But the Class 1 railroads, all 12 of them have, I think, basically agreed on a contracts, but it has not been ratified. I think only about 6 of the 12 have actually the membership has ratified. So we're not out of the woods yet, so to speak. But hopefully they can come to finalize those agreements as well. But they're in discussions and finalizing the 6 that have not been ratified.
All right, and could you also, since you have a Port Authority team here, and I believe one of them will be our state affairs contact. Could you introduce your team,
Yeah,
please?
no, I would love to. That would be great. So maybe we could ask them to stand. So we have Catherine Reeves, who is taking over the state activities, and then Maggie Oliver, who will be handling media and communications, as well as some of our federal affairs. And they've been with us. Maggie's been here maybe 7 months, 8 months. And Catherine has been here, I think, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I forget the number is. So we're really fortunate to have 2 bright new people in our organization. So
I encourage any of the members, if you have questions, not only was Director Driscoll available, but you have 2 very capable people that can run interference for him.
Thank you.
And then I have one trivia question for the crowd and for the members. Who was the Alabamian that created container shipping? In the back.
Malcolm McLean.
Malcolm McLean, you are right.
Yeah.
So Malcolm McLean was an Alabamian. Did he not say Malcolm?
You did.
Anyway, that's a point of pride with me that an Alabamian created such a dynamic shipping manner that is growing our port today.
Very much so.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Next up, we have Eric Harrison, the policy analyst with the Council of State Governments, the Southern Office. Eric's going to follow up on some reports of southeastern ports and the difference between Alabama and the many ports that we compete with.
And I have a few things for y'all. just in case anyone wants a paper copy of the presentation.
Right, this is a paper copy of the presentation that I'll have on the screen.
As well as a one-sheeter about CSG South, what we do, why we can help you out. And then a couple of fact sheets, it's actually about 9 different reports around the region. So my name's Eric Harrison. Mic is a little bit hotter than I thought it was going to be. And I'm with the Council of State Governments. I'm with the Southern Region. We're located in Atlanta. Our national office is located in Lexington, Kentucky. We also have an Eastern office in New York, a Midwestern office in Chicago, and a Western office in Sacramento. But we were founded in 1933, and we still are the only organization that functions to support all 3 branches of state government. So we will work with the legislature, as I am here today. We work with the executive branch as well as the judiciary. The Southern office opened up in 1959. And we've been around for a while to help y'all out. Consider us your back office that you didn't realize you had, especially around policy analysis. We've got 4 analysts in the South office, but if we can't answer it, we've got another 40 analysts up in Kentucky that we can reach out to. And if it's a criminal justice issue, there's another 100 analysts and attorneys in our Justice Center up in New York that we can also reach out to be able to answer any of your questions. We cover all of the SEC states and a little bit more. Now that Texas and Oklahoma are coming into the SEC, our conference is getting a little bit bigger. But we also have West Virginia and Virginia, and Missouri kind of sticks out like a thumb. But we try to reach out and catch up with y'all every year during sessions. So you'll see us coming around when y'all come back in March. Just trying to touch base with y'all, remind you that we're here and we are here to help. Who am I? Short version, I'm a nerd. Longer version, I'm a policy analyst that covers transportation, economic development, and cultural affairs for CSG South. And I also have a few other issues in my background, but I've also worked in legislative offices at the state and federal level and in partisan and nonpartisan roles. I've always prided myself on being able to support my members that I was working with to have all the answers to the questions that they needed to know before they went to committees so that they wouldn't catch that question out of the side and be able to prepare themselves to answer those oddball questions that come out from right field. I've got a BA from the University of South Carolina and an MA from Georgia State. And so let's go ahead and jump into ports. So what I want to do is I want to start a little bit larger and then work down to Mobile. But as you can see from this slide, these are the most common shipping lanes around the world. The heavier red lines are the ones that you'll see going over the water. It may be a little bit difficult to see on the slide, but you can see it a little bit easier on the handout. The lighter orange are your road networks within countries. So you can see where there's a giant gap in the Sahara as well as the Amazon. But you can see that the United States is well situated for trade around the world. We do not have the busiest ports in the world. Those belong in East Asia. But we are well situated for Asian and European trade. The busiest ports by TEU, which is a 20-foot equivalent unit, if you see an 18-wheeler running around, that's probably a 40-foot container. Most of those, it's usually what you see on a ship coming off. And so that is 2 TEUs, or roughly, I think if my math is correct, it's about 48 million peanuts. It is a measurement of volume. It's a 40-foot by 8-foot by 8-foot box. And so one of those is 2 TEUs. And you can see here that Shanghai, Singapore, Ningbo, East Asia really rounds out the busiest ports in the world. And these are 43 million TEUs a year for Shanghai. They actually built a whole new island for their port. It's not actually in the city proper. The land didn't exist a while ago, and they just built an island to service their trade. But if you see here at number 10, the busiest port, the first one that comes from the United States is LA Long Beach, which is actually 2 ports combined together, and that's how we can get to 17 million and crack the top 10. I don't really have a good spot to put this one, but this is an important thing to know. I was talking to your port director a moment ago, and y'all have 4 gantry cranes. This is how you get the boxes off of the boats. And when Representative Wilcox was hanging out with us in Savannah during our ports master class, Lee Beckman from the Georgia Port Authority was telling us that a trained crane operator can move about 40 boxes an hour. So if you look at Long Beach, that's about 2,720, give or take a few. I mean, it may take a little bit longer for some boxes moves. It may take a little bit shorter for others. But they can make that many container moves in an hour. Savannah is sitting at 1,500, New Orleans at 240, and with Mobile, it's about 160 container moves an hour. So gantry cranes are really important for your ports that have mostly container traffic coming through. They're not particularly helpful with break bulk, but we can get to that in a moment. Roll on, roll off. Sounds just like it is. The cars roll on to the ships. They roll off of the ships. The United States has a marine highway network that is similar to the interstate system, and the names are similar. So if you look at Alabama, you have Marine Highway 65, which tracks Interstate 65. And you also have Marine Highway 10, which kind of tracks I-10 along the coast in the Gulf. These are mostly your river systems, as well as some of your intercoastal waterways. So as we're getting a little bit closer, the importance of intermodal. I did not realize y'all had that many of the Class 1 rails coming into Mobile. So this gives you a map of where all of those Class 1 railroads are. And you can see that in the Southeast, we are fairly well situated, Chicago being the center of the rail network for the most part. But we are very well situated in the CSG South region for rail and being able to connect our port and our maritime trade to getting that onto a train to either get it up to Chicago to go to the rest of the United States, or to get it over to, say, Jefferson City, Missouri, since they have a few rail lines that go through the middle of the state there as well. As someone who lives in the city of Atlanta, I always get excited when Lee Beckman tells me that there's more train capacity coming in at Savannah, because that means that there's fewer trucks on 285 and my commute gets a little bit better. So the more y'all can connect to having that intermodal connection with your port, having it on rail, being able to handle truck to rail down to the port, train to truck coming off from Mobile, it can really help alleviate your traffic issues on your local roads. And just to round out the intermodal, y'all are probably all familiar with the interstate system, but here's the U.S. highway system as well as the U.S. interstate system. Why does maritime matter? So nationally, covers about 26% of GDP. For number-wise, that is $5.4 trillion worth of economic growth impact around the country. So it's super impactful for our region. You may remember the Ever Given kind of went catawampus in the Suez Canal a couple years ago, and no one really noticed it in the States until about a week later when things weren't on the shelf, because the Suez Canal is such a constraint is a popular route for trade, and most of the we're bringing a lot from outside, we're sending a lot outside. So as maritime trade, it is a super efficient way to move things around, because unlike rail, unlike truck, there's no weight capacity limit on the water. You've got as big as of a boat that you can handle, but the water is not gonna break down like the asphalt will if you have overloaded trucks running on it constantly. You don't have to repave the ocean, so it makes it really easy to move products from one place to another. Because we are now a more globally interconnected trade system, this is the easiest, most cost-effective way to move stuff between the United States and other foreign markets. So when your coal starts going from Tuscaloosa down to steel manufacturers, it's probably going to go through the Panama Canal and end up in China and South Korea for their steel production. So having that ability to make that export smoothly move through your state and get to where it needs to go, that'll have a continued economic impact on your state. So types of ports. A lot of ports work very differently. I may be accused of bias for Georgia. I've lived there for the last few years of my life, and it's one that I know a little bit better since that's the state legislature that I worked with. Please don't take it personally. I'm also not going to bring up the football team from Athens, so don't worry. But your main types, you have your operational port. This is Savannah, Jacksonville, and to just most extent, Mobile. You have your landlord port. Mobile also happens to work with that a little bit. You find this more common definitely in New York, New Jersey, as well as LA, Long Beach, Miami, and New Orleans. And then you have Houston that kind of does a little bit of both. And so what does this mean? The operational port, the Port Authority itself runs most everything. They own the wharf, they own the terminal, they run the terminal, they own the cranes, they negotiate with the labor. In the case of Savannah, the crane operators are all Georgia Port Authority employees. They're not stevedore, or they're not union stevedores or union longshoremen. The term can be used intermittently. It means the same either way, just some have a preference for one versus the other. But when it comes to actually moving cargo around in the docks, moving some other stuff around, they'll negotiate with labor to make sure that that happens. So having that direct operational role and being able to own the facility and not necessarily rent out the terminal for someone else to run, which is the landlord port, which is exactly what New York, New Jersey Port Authority does. So the New York, New Jersey Port Authority runs both the port terminals, the New York Metro system, as well as the airports in the area, and I believe 2 ferry systems. So they do a little bit more than their name suggests, but they're landlord ports. They own the land, but they hire out someone else to come in and actually manage the terminal, to handle the ships coming in, to manage the labor coming in, to move the stuff around, making sure that they have all the equipment that they need. And typically the operator itself that manages the terminal will be the one that makes the capital investments in the equipment needed to unload, whether that's break bulk, roll on, roll off, container shipping, which we can see here, bulk cargo, your coal, your iron ore, your sugar, break bulk, kind of like bulk cargo, just not in a container, but it's still manageable. So bagged rice is generally a pretty good example of that. Neo bulk, it's still a bulk material. However, it's a little bit more like a container in that it's baled. So wood pulp bales, if you have products that are palletized and already wrapped in the saran wrap, you can stack them like you would a container. You can handle them like a container, but they don't have that metal box around them. The container port or a container shipping, as you can see, you've got the 40 by 8 by 8 or the 20 by 8 by 8 boxes. Those are standards. The original standard by that great Mobilian was a 35-foot container. So we've changed that around a little bit for standardization around the world. Liquid, so Savannah doesn't have a lot of this. Houston has a great deal of this because of LNG, oil. You need some specific terminal types to be able to handle those pipelines coming in of that liquefied material to get it onto a ship. And their ships are also a little bit different. And then finally, your roll on, roll off, your cars, tractors, any kind of vehicle that you can roll onto the boat and roll off of the boat. You do have a couple of different business models. So that landlord port is probably going to make most of their money off of the lease that they make with that provider or that terminal operator. Maersk is a big one. So they, in addition to being a shipper themselves or a carrier themselves, they also manage about, I think, 90 ports around the world. So as the Port of Mobile, if y'all wanted to, you could go to a company like Maersk or another terminal operator and lease out all of that land and let them manage the port, and you just collect the rent off of the lease as a state. But you also have that direct model, like Savannah. So Savannah is directly run by the state or the Georgia Port Authority. There's a 7-member board that oversees it, but they're the ones that make all those investment decisions about what kind of equipment to get, which equipment to get, negotiating with the feds over how are they going to get another gantry crane when they can't be produced in the United States, but they still have to be compliant with the Build America Act. There's really only a couple of companies that are capable of building those gantry cranes. They had a contract for 6. They got 2 in the States, and then the other 4 had to come from, I believe, Denmark. And then you have your private terminals. So right next to Savannah, again, I'm not trying to be biased against Mobile, but it is what I know. There is a private terminal right next to the Port Authority where A sugar refiner runs their terminal. They have raw sugar that comes in. They have a refinery right there. It's all completely private. They're the ones that manage that terminal. They take care of all of the infrastructure that's there, and they have their own private or their own roads for trucks to come in and out, or their own rail spur in order to get it back on the rail system to hopefully not clog up traffic at 5 o'clock on 285 around Atlanta. So you've got a few different business models, and then clearly you have an operation where you can have a hybrid model in between, where Houston has, the Port of Houston covers 4 counties. They have a Port Authority board of commissioners that are appointed. It's not necessarily completely state-run. It's not county-run. It's a little quasi. But they also have terminals that they lease out that someone else will run, and then they have their own terminals where they manage all of the activity that happens on that terminal. So, Alabama State Port Authority. Here's some fiscal viability for y'all. Y'all are sitting at a total net position, and this was 2021 into the fiscal year, September 30, 2021. Net position at $372 million positive. So pretty good position to be in. Y'all are doing pretty well. The deferred inflows of resources, some of that is, while it's a liability, deferred your pension benefits and that kind of stuff. Some of it's debt for expansion projects. Your current assets, y'all have put a lot of money into the port. There's some good infrastructure there. You're taking good care of it, and you're doing pretty well with it. Georgia Port Authority, Savannah, Brunswick, a little bit different, a little bit bigger. It is the 4th largest port, 3rd if you combine New York, New Jersey. In the United States, it's the busiest port, or 2nd busiest port on the East Coast, and it's the farthest inland on the East Coast. So it gives it a few more advantages that it is a few miles up the river. But total net position sitting at a little over $2.4 billion. These are in thousands of dollars at the end of Georgia's fiscal year, which is June 30 of 2022. Again, you can see Georgia runs a little bit differently. They didn't start taking out bond debt. They do have a AA bond rating, but they didn't really have a whole lot of debt until recently. The COVID shortages kind of took their 10-year plan. They condensed it into about a 6 or 7 year plan. So in order to get some of that extra capital to be able to make those investments in expanding the port, expanding some of their rail capabilities, they can handle 6 10,000-foot long trains at any given time from their port and drop it right onto Class A rail. So they do have a little bit of bond debt right now, which is unusual for them, but that was because they took a 10-year plan and they needed to get it done a little bit quicker. The Port of Houston Authority also sitting around just a little under $2 billion net position. So these are so far, everyone's a fairly profitable port. The infrastructure's going in. They're making money on the assets that are there, the rents that are being paid by either the terminal leases or the fees and everything that the Port Authority collects from those shippers coming in. Tampa Bay, a little bit different. So Tampa Bay is run by the city, and most of the ports in Florida are run by a city or a county, whereas so far everyone else we've talked about is generally a state-run operation. So Port of Tampa Bay, Port of Miami, they're a little bit different. Jacksonville, however, is a state-run port. Florida has about 22 different ports that are available, most of which are city or county-run ports. They're a much smaller operation, but these are in thousands, so they're sitting at about a $658 million net position, again, in positive. So far, everyone's doing pretty good. I didn't want to shame New Orleans too much, so I don't have them on here, but they are operating at a net negative of $12 million a year. In the course of CSG South, our smallest state budget is the state of Oklahoma at about $4 billion a year. $12 million as an annual appropriation is not that big of a deal for some states to make. However, that is $12 million. It could go to something else like education, like healthcare, some of your more higher priority issues, if you can make that port a self-sufficient port. The Port of South Louisiana is generally considered the largest port in the United States, and some folks would say in the world, because of the sheer tonnage of agricultural product that comes through. It's also about 250 miles long on the river, so they get a little bit of extra space to put all of that agricultural product. But again, different ports work in different areas, but it is more of a riverine port that happens to also be connected to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the next slide is not similar to anything else. I was asked about road aggregate costs, and to the member who is very specifically interested in finding out how much Georgia pays for their asphalt, I do not have the answer to that question yet. Still have a couple of folks that are waiting to get back to me. So I can't tell you exactly how Alabama compares to the states around when it comes to the aggregates costs for building a road. But we do have the National Highway Cost Construction Index here. And what this does is it takes into account all of the things that go into constructing a highway, whether that's the gravel that goes underneath, the asphalt that goes on top, the concrete for an interstate system, all the labor, everything that goes into building a mile of road. And so if we use some round numbers, just because I majored in politics because I was told there'd be no math, where this chart starts is Q1 of 2003. Everything's indexed based off of that cost. So if it took, $1 million to buy 1 lane mile of road, then you're at 1. That's Q1 of 2003. Fast forward to the end of the chart, we are now at a cost index of sorry, my eyes are not as good as they once were, so I'm going to look at my cheat sheet here. 2.3-ish. So that same lane mile of road is now costing $2.3 million. So we've seen a great deal of cost increase over the last 20 years. Some of that is due to inflation. Some of that is due to the price of oil. The price of oil and the price of asphalt are directly related. So as oil prices go up, your road building cost will go up. Now, just because I said I don't have that number yet on what the aggregate costs are for the different states around the Southeast, I am still trying to find that. And as soon as I do find it, I will let y'all know so that y'all know how Alabama compares to other states when it comes to purchasing aggregates to build their roads. And with that, if y'all have any questions, I will happily yield the floor for questions. If y'all want to send me an email, text message, by all means, feel free to reach out. That QR code also will get you to my Twitter, LinkedIn, everything you need. You can just go ahead and import it straight into your phone if you want to make it easy for yourself. So with that, Chairman Wilcox, thank you for letting me come and present. And to the committee, thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you so much. Members, do you have any questions? Senator Allen, you're recognized.
Mr. Harrison, looking at the roll on and roll off ports as far as the activity, do you have a ranking on what port in the southeast is like 1, 2, 3?
I do not have the ranking off the top of my head. I would imagine Brunswick is up there. That's the Brunswick terminal for the Georgia Port Authority is where all of Kia and Mercedes go through. Charleston probably has a fair amount as well, but I can find a definitive ranking for you.
That would be something that I would think that not only myself, but members of this committee would like to have. And since Alabama is almost leading the nation in building vehicles, I would love to see that number. Thank you, sir.
I'll find it for you, sir.
Yeah, I think we're all interested to make sure that Alabama-made vehicles don't ship out of Georgia and they ship out of Alabama.
Totally understand, ma'am.
Do we have any members with any questions? Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Senator, you have the floor.
Madam Chairman, on that note, it's my understanding that in the state of Georgia, if you accept their state incentives, you have to ship through their port. And that might not be a bad thing for us to look at in the state of Alabama.
There are some economic development incentives around shipping through the port and building distribution centers. Home Depot has taken a big advantage of that. There's a few other larger retail institutions that have taken advantage of that around and building their warehouse capacity around the Port of Savannah. I can find the exact numbers for you if you'd like.
We'd like for you to send us copies of those, please. Not that we don't like to, we don't want to reinvent the wheel if we can do it in another
I
quicker
believe my
manner.
Vice Chair for Human Services and Public Safety is very convinced that there's no need to reinvent the wheel 17 times with 17 different states doing stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate Mr. Harrison coming here, and we appreciate the Council of State Government Southern Division. Appreciate you.
Thank you, ma'am. And if for the packet of different ports that has the map on it, it has some of their main imports and exports, and that should be a pretty good look around the region. But I will find out the answers for those roll-on, roll-off, and I will find out more information for that economic incentive. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ed Austin with AlDOT, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. There should be some information coming down the aisles now. I think Tony just passed out. This is the fiscal year 2023 budget for the Alabama Department of Transportation. So you'll see from an anticipated fund standpoint from the federal side, there is, as we talked about in the last meeting, there's a couple of different categories of federal funding through the new IIJA. What we called legacy programs and the new programs. The legacy programs are about $953 million. The federal funds under the new program is about $110 million this year. Our state public road and bridge funds are anticipated to be around $530 million. Rebuild Alabama Act funds about $200 million. We do currently receive about $74 million a year through the Appalachian Development Highway System. That was something that was restarted under the IIJA, so it's a 5-year appropriation for that same amount over a 5-year period. And then our Aeronautics Bureau gets $35 million, so the anticipated funds total is about $1.9 billion for this fiscal year. As we talked about last year and carrying over into this year, we are still dealing with continuing resolution issues through Congress. We have been given a continuing resolution through December the 16th, which is about 11 weeks of the 52-week year. So we've only received 11/52 of our funding that is shown on here from a federal perspective. So that represents a number that's a little under $200 million for the next 11 weeks, which will get us through our next 2 lettings at the DOT. Next category you see is the state public road and bridge funds that are appropriated or transferred. Excuse me. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency between 2 different appropriations is $24,700,000 this year. Industrial Access Road and Bridge Corporation is $11 million annually. Our county engineer's salary support is about $7.9 million this year. Revenue Department, $3.7 million transfer. State personnel, $1.71 million for the state comptroller's office. $500,000 for the state parks maintenance. $125,000 for captive county insurance. It goes back several years when some counties were captive counties. The total amount of state public road and bridge appropriations and transfers is $50.6 million. The Rebuild Alabama Act fund appropriations since its inception in 2019. There are 2 programs associated with the Rebuild Alabama Act for projects of local interest, ATRIP 2 and the local grant program. ATRIP 2 is scheduled to be between 30 and 50 million. That number for this fiscal year has been set at 40 million. The local grant program is statutorily set at 10 million a year. And then the county federal aid exchange, where we used to provide $533,000 a year to each county, we now provide them $400,000 through the Rebuild Alabama Act. That accounts for $26.8 million of the money we receive. So the total amount of the appropriations is $76.8 million. The next page you'll see is where we detail this expenditure of the federal funds that was shown on the first page, at least those parts that come directly to ALDOT, does not include the Appalachian Development. Those funds are only eligible for projects that are designated federally through the Act. So that $73.875 million has to be spent on a project that is designated congressionally. But our aid to local governments, this includes our large and small MPOs, things like congestion mitigation, air quality requirements, transportation alternatives, safety, those types of programs is $120 million this year. The transfer that I just discussed about the county federal aid funds, there are still a balance remaining with those counties of those federal funds. This is the last year of that. It's $9.7 million. So we have two Garvey bond programs, one that was done for the original ATRIP program back in 2012, and then the CBD project that was done in 15 and 16. Those debt services are $66.1 billion and $47.2 billion respectively. Our safety program is designated at $58.5 million this year, interstate maintenance at $176 million, state route resurfacing, $232 million, system enhancement, $134 million, bridge replacement, just under $91 million, statewide planning is about $18.5 million, and then the new programs that are shown on the first page, those IIJA new programs, carbon reduction, a little over $24.5 million this year, Protect, which is the resiliency funds, is just over $28 million. Our bridge formula funds every year is $45 million through the 5 years of the Act. The National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, you may have heard it called, referenced as NEVI, is just under $12 million, and a very small amount for ferry boats and terminals, about $155,000 a year. That accounts for a little over $1 billion of the federal funds we're anticipated to receive this year. The last page is our state public road and bridge funds. $150 million for federal aid match, $6.3 for the Garvey bond ATRIP payment match, and a little over $3 million for CBD payment match. Our state routine maintenance is about $157.5 million. State bridge maintenance, $6.5. State maintenance resurfacing, which is our preliminary engineering cost to advance those projects, is about $5 million. State roadway maintenance, $5 million. State traffic maintenance, 2.5, state miscellaneous maintenance, 3.5, and finally, state emergency maintenance is $5 million. Our state construction for this year is scheduled to be $19 million. Administrative overhead for the department's $95 million. Other equipment is $12 million, and land and building is $9 million. That comes to just over $479 million. You add the $50.6 million of appropriations and transfers from the previous page, and there's the $530 that is anticipated or budgeted for this year. And then finally, for Rebuild Alabama Act, we'll use a little over $10 million of that money for federal aid match. The rest will be divided evenly between congestion relief and economic development is the plan. Currently, as we've told this committee previously, we're not planning on using any for system preservation currently, but as the additional cost for IIJA match goes up, if there's not something addressed to deal with that, our only option would be to utilize Rebuild Alabama Act accordingly. That comes to $123.2 million. The appropriations from the previous page of $76.8 comes to the $200 million for Rebuild Alabama Act. Madam Chair, that's the fiscal year budget 23 information. And if there's anything else, let me know.
Okay, before we take questions on the budget, which I'm assuming there's many since there's so many people looking at me, give a quick report on the ferry in Mobile, please.
Yes, ma'am. Be glad to. So the Fort Morgan Dauphin Island ferry has been shut down for about 9 days. Excuse me. So we have two boats that we utilize. About a month ago, we start getting into the slower volume usage, and so we typically schedule sometime between fall and early winter an opportunity to dry dock one of those two ferries to do routine maintenance on. During the normal heavy time in the spring and summer, we're running both ferries. So we had put one of the ferries in for its routine maintenance about a month ago. It's scheduled to come out at the end of the week to early next week. But unfortunately, while it was dry docked getting serviced, during a routine inspection of the other ferry, it turned out that the lifeboat that's associated with that ferry had an issue, and the Coast Guard will not let you run the ferry if the lifeboat is not completely operational and in good working order. We undertook to replace that lifeboat. As many of you understand, procurement issues being what they are right now, turned out it was going to take longer than we anticipated to procure a new lifeboat. And so we decided to do repairs on the existing lifeboat. Those were approved by the Coast Guard this morning. And technically, the ferry could have reopened this afternoon. Weather issues are precluding us from doing that. As you know, the weather dictates in many cases, even if there is an operational ferry, that we can or that we cannot operate. So our plan is to open in the morning, assuming weather is good. And in a week from now, give or take, both ferries will be back in operation, but the other one should be back operational in the morning.
Okay, thank you. All right, now I'll open it up to the membership for questions about the budget.
Madam Chairman.
Is it about the budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you're recognized.
I wouldn't dare, Madam Chairman. Mr. Austin, thanks for being here today. I want to draw your attention back to page 1 and industrial access, road and bridge, that funding there. And you and I had exchanged some emails about this before, and I know this committee's heard me speak about this before. I am concerned, again, and probably this session I'm going to do something about those concerns instead of just talking about them, but I'm concerned about the balance that continues to accrue there. It is there, and I think it was the legislative intent for that money to be used for industrial access and not simply accrued for future industrial access. There have been a number of large projects, one in Senator Albritton and Representative Baker's district, that are near your district, I think, that a $3 billion investment that could use an awful lot of industrial access money. And yet, State Department of Transportation seems to be carrying a balance of at least a year and a half appropriation and about to get another year's appropriation on top of that. It is concerning, has been, I've articulated it, it continues to be a concern to me that that money seems to sit there and is doled out in dribs and drabs, no matter how significant and monumental the capital expense of a project might be. So I just want to say again, I am concerned about that. I continue to be concerned about that. It hadn't made a difference. My concerns hadn't made a difference. But if they're going to sit in the bank, I'd rather see them put in asphalt somewhere.
Well, as you and I have discussed, there are rules that the committee is forced to follow that are set up statutorily in the law. So the committee goes as far as they can go, in many cases providing portions of funds on projects that probably are close to meeting those requirements. So I don't think it's a situation, Senator, of the board being unwilling to help to the extent they can, but the rules being what the rules are, that board is required to follow the rules as the statute dictates. And so
well, my simple response to that would be if we need to change the rules, let's look at changing the rules. But
that's a legislative issue. Our issue is we're forced to follow those rules and enforce those rules. We do not have a voice in changing those rules.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Senator Elliott, I think that tees up for you to take that to the legislative committee when we get those appointments made.
You heard they asked for it, right?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, next question.
Madam Chair.
Senator Chambliss, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Austin. The Garvey bond A-trip payment, that is for A-trip 1, correct? Because we did not authorize any, I think we did authorize some bond issuance in the latest rebuild, but it was limited, I think.
So the A-trip 1 project, Garvey bonds are not required to come to the legislature. But the matching funds of the original A-trip 1 program, what was called the RAMP program, the Rural Assistance Match Program, did come through this legislative body, and you did pass a law to provide 25 million of state matching funds to go along with A-Trip 1. But A-Trip 1 there was no legislatively required issue to address. That's an issue that the department can do, assuming we can receive a market grade opinion that says we can pay it back.
Do you remember off the top of your head when those A-Trip 1 bonds will be paid out?
2034 or 2035, Senator, and if you'll shoot me a message.
That's close enough.
And then the CBD bonds are about 3 years later, so 36, 37, 38. But the way we've structured those, our yearly payment stays the same through the life. So we're deferring. So we're paying more on A-Trip 2 right now, or A-Trip 1, excuse me, right now. And then at the last 3 or 4 years, we will pay the full amount on CBD to finish that debt service. So our payment will stay the same through the life of both of those. They're tied together from a bonding perspective.
Do you remember what the total cost for the CDB project is?
The total cost for it?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of about 700 to 800 million, if I remember correct, Senator. That's several years ago now. My memory's not as good as it used to be. Somewhere in that neighborhood.
I think the other questions I had, you answered dealing with the county matching, that's going to be used up this year, the
Correct.
federal aid balances?
Yes, so the agreement that was struck with the County Commission Association was we would work for 3 years with them to utilize those balances. Several counties had several years worth of a balance, and that requires a match. That federal money requires a 20% match. It was a challenge for some of them to try to spend that money quickly, so we agreed to continue utilizing or letting them utilize those balance for 3 years. So that will end in a few months.
This year.
December, actually. So November, December letting, and then we'll be done.
So the last question that I had is on the aid to local governments. If I remember correctly, there was kind of a ramping up to get to the full program.
Yes.
Is this 120 million, or is that at full program?
It is. So some of those programs through the IIJA in the past, the money that was suballocated from ALDOT to the locals primarily came through one location, what's called our Surface Transportation Program, STP, if you've seen project numbers on them. Some of these other programs that IIJA created also has a suballocation portion to those. So that's why that number has gone up versus previous years.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the members?
Mr. Chairman.
You're recognized, sir.
Yes. Mr. Austin, looking at the EV program statewide, and as far as the interstate system, we have 1,060 miles interstate mileage?
That's right.
That's close, isn't it?
And it's very close.
Okay, so the Biden administration has awarded Alabama over a period of 5 years a certain amount of dollars, and I see here, but if you would explain maybe off the top of your head, maybe that what system. I know ADECA is involved with this.
That's right.
So can you give us just a glimpse of the procedures and how that operates?
Sure, be glad to. So the way that what's called the NEVI program was set up through IIJA is first you have to submit a plan that has to be approved through the Federal Highway Administration before you can utilize any of those funds. As many of you know and are aware, the VW settlement several years ago was ran through ADECA. They developed a plan to utilize the settlement money from VW, which also dealt with electric vehicle issues. And so once the NEVI program information came through, the decision was made to not reinvent the wheel and for ALDOT to pick up and start new or run with that ball. So ADECA has stepped up and is administering that program. Their plan was submitted to Federal Highway Administration several weeks ago. We got response back a couple of 3 weeks ago, Senator. That plan is now approved. So at this point, And I don't want to get out of my lane here because ADECA is handling this. They should be at a point where they're ready to begin the process of an application or whatever they choose to do to figure out a way to distribute and utilize the NEVI funds that are coming in. So Alabama is scheduled to receive, assuming there's not a rescission or a continuing resolution that impacts that, it's between 65 and 70 million, I believe, is the number over 5 years. 11 to 12 million the first year, and then it goes up a couple million, steps up $1 million or $2 million every year, and so it ends up being 65 or 70 million over a 5-year period of time.
Okay, so for the colleagues here today, once you exit off the interstate system, and for instance, if you exit off exit 77 or 76 or in Tuscaloosa, or in somewhere in rural Alabama, and you get somewhere, 50, 60 miles away from the interstate system, the rural counties and towns and cities must be able to maybe look at this carefully as far as how to meet those needs of those individuals who tour Alabama and tourism. This is really a tourism issue.
Yes, sir.
So my colleagues here, we all need to take a close look on how to handle those portions of the state that does not have interstate systems where these tourists can come in and visit our great state. So just for the thought there, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. I have a question about one of your line items. The state comptroller line item, could you expand upon that? And then also an example of on page 3, a small example of what state miscellaneous maintenance would be.
Okay. So the state comptroller's office, most departments pay a cost to personnel, comptrollers, and other things to process and interact with those agencies. There's a cost associated with that. Our cost for this fiscal year is $1 million, and it's been that same general number for several years now.
Okay, thank you.
Miscellaneous maintenance. So if you look, there's probably 6 different types of maintenance items on here. I'd hate to tell you what exactly fits in the miscellaneous. There's so many of them. How about, if you don't mind, let me get you some examples of each of those 6 that I will send to you, and you can share them with the committee, and it'll give you an example of what types of issues we address under our normal routine maintenance, bridge maintenance, traffic maintenance, emergency maintenance, miscellaneous, and bridge maintenance. Like I said, there's 6 different categories, and I'd hate to tell you in a specific example, and it turns out it doesn't fit under miscellaneous. It fits under something else. So.
Okay, and finally, your Appalachian Development Highway System is new to this report, so give us a little quickie on that, please.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So several years ago, probably maybe 20 or more years ago, there was some funds put in federal transportation legislation to address road improvements in Appalachia. There's 18 states, I think, that fit in that. Runs from New York, Pennsylvania, all the way down through Georgia into Alabama. Alabama is the last state as you head south. And there's actually several counties in Alabama that qualify. A good portion of the north part of the state, and it comes down through Jefferson, Shelby, and starts cutting over a little bit and ends up finishing up as far south as Chambers County to an extent, almost to I-85. So a good portion of our counties qualify under the Appalachian region. And so funds that are dedicated for that must fit certain criteria that Congress typically designates for the use of those funds. So the use of them through the IIJA this year are predicated on unfinished corridors that had been approved previously by the Appalachian Region Commission. And in Alabama, there's only one or two, primarily Birmingham North Beltline, the outer loop on the northeast and northwest side of Birmingham. So the intention right now is the first section of the Birmingham North Beltline that we will address will be between State Route 75 and State Route 79 in the northeast section of Jefferson County. And that will be the first project that we will utilize. This year's allocation is on that project, Representative.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions before we relieve him of the podium? Yes, sir. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's my understanding that the FHWA money, every state applies from that redistribution, any unspent monies. Why did Alabama, why were we the only state that did not do that?
Yes, sir. So the thing you have to understand, we're not talking about new money. So what August redistribution is the federal government takes money that was allocated or appropriated for, say, TIFIA or some other program that's not federal highway related. Those funds that are available are made available for other uses. But to spend those, you have to have what's called obligation authority or obligation limitation to spend. This year was just a perfect storm for us between our MPOs, several are carrying a fairly significant balance of funds. We did not have additional obligation authority that we could accept money from that we didn't have obligation authority for, Senator. And this gets a little dicey, I understand, hard to out in the weeds, but if we would have requested it, we had no way of spending it short of borrowing obligation authority from one of the MPOs. And then you have to be able to do a project in that MPO district, and we just did not have that this year, unfortunately. So it was just an unfortunate situation for us that we had utilized all of our obligation authority by the time the August redistribution came out.
So in other words, we did not have the matching funds.
No, sir, it's not matching funds. So keep in mind that Congress gives us an appropriation, and then they give us an authorization, and then they give us an appropriation that allows us to spend.
It wasn't obligated.
Correct.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your report, and thank you for getting back with us on the follow-up material.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And now we have been in pursuit of somebody to come and discuss the new infrastructure, and I am pleased to introduce Heather Dean Semay. She is with a transportation specialist for the Office of Policy and Governmental Affairs for the Federal Highway Administration, and she is going to be on your screen. So, Ms. Semay.
Good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for your time, and it is wonderful to follow up after your folks from Alabama DOT spoke, because it plays in perfectly to what we here at Federal Highways do. And as my introduction said, I work in the Office of Policy. I've been working for Federal Highways for 10 years now, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit high level on the bipartisan infrastructure law, or formerly known as IIJA. We here at the department call it the bipartisan infrastructure law because IJA just doesn't quite roll off the tongue. So if you see bill in big caps, that's essentially what we're referring to, is a lot of funding from the contract authorization from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Just to give you some high-level points of the significance of the bipartisan infrastructure law, prior to this, we were looking at, continuing resolutions that were looking at short-term extensions. The bipartisan infrastructure law really represents a historic amount of funding. In fact, it's the largest amount of investment in surface transportation since the creation of the Eisenhower system. So we're talking about the largest amount of federal investment into surface, ports, transit, and rail since the 1950s. As it pertains to federal highways, we're looking at a total of $567 billion in surface transportation and road funding alone. This is for the lifetime of the bill. So this is going to be fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 2026. And of that amount, we're looking at $350.8 billion for highways alone. These are huge numbers. These are historic numbers. But what does this mean for Alabama in particular? Now, obviously, You guys just went through your fiscal year 23 budget, so I won't go into super strong specifics, but for comparison purposes, it's important to note that for the last year of contract authorization you had under the FAST Act, so for the previous bill that you guys were receiving funding, Alabama received roughly $800 million in contract authority. Under the current fiscal year, which the funding was apportioned 2 weeks ago, you're looking at roughly $1.1 billion. So that's a significant increase in contract authority and formula dollars going to your state DOT for different programs such as, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, Surface Transportation Block Grant programs, all of those things. Including brand new programs like our bridge program, which for fiscal year 23, Alabama was receiving roughly $45 million. And as talked about for the NEVI program for fiscal year 23, we're looking at roughly $16.8 million. And for the ADHS system, of which you guys receive a portion of funding because you are on the Appalachian Development Highway System, $74 million. Essentially what this is me talking to you about high levels of how much significant investment we're seeing from the federal government into surface transportation. And a lot of this is formula dollars going to your state DOT, which Aldot just talked about some of the programming and things. But one of the things I wanted to make sure I highlighted for you folks while I have you here is now there's all kinds of discretionary grant programs, meaning programs that all kinds of communities, both your state DOT and even smaller cities, localities, MPOs, and regions can apply for. We're looking at discretionary grant programs for things like, Protect, which is resiliency, things like large bridge programs, mega programs, RAISE programs, carbon reduction, congestion relief. Truly, there's a myriad of funding opportunities out there, and opportunities that are out there for all kinds of both traditional stakeholders like your state DOT and more non-traditional stakeholders like cities, MPOs, tribes, and other smaller segments of government. And then just to hit on some things that have been going on recently within DOT that you would likely have interest in. As I mentioned, and as you heard, 2 weeks ago, the apportionment notice went out providing a lot of funding for state DOTs, but also on October 12th, the department announced $18.4 million in bridge planning grants toward 23 projects. So this is a pot of funds for bridge planning for smaller communities or smaller bridge projects. We are also in the process of reviewing large bridge project grants. We're hoping to make announcements for those, and those are essentially grants available for bridge replacement, rehabilitation, preservation, and protection projects for projects that are greater than 100 million. We are currently reviewing all those applications and hoping to get announcements out sometime this fall. And then there's yet another bridge program, which is just bridge grant programs, which are for projects that are less than 100 million. And that application window has recently closed and is still being looked at and reviewed. This is just a small segment of generally over a dozen different grant programs for a lot of different opportunities and areas where transportation is going to be a focus area of both the department and the administration as a whole. It's been really interesting for me to sit in through your entire meeting and hear how important your port facilities are, to hear how important your freight movement is, your transit movement is. There's really a lot of opportunities for multimodalism, both within FHWA through our National Highway Freight Program, but also at the department as a whole. We have a lot of different grant programs that talk about things like connectivity. We have carbon reduction of port emissions and all kinds of things out there. But essentially, I'm here today to answer any questions you may have about eligibility of programs or how any of these things are working, or just general questions, comments, or concerns. So with that, let me turn it back to you guys and see if there's anything I can assist you with today.
Well, we have a mega grant application for the I-10 Mobile River Bridge. So I'd be remiss if that wasn't the first thing that came off the podium. So please give us 10 extra points for asking when you grade those.
So that program is run out of the Office of the Secretary. I know that they're currently in the process of reviewing all those grants and that they hope to make awards in the not too distant future, probably before the end of the calendar year, but I will be sure to let them know how kind and friendly you guys were.
Thank you. Does any of the committee members have any follow-up questions?
Madam Chairman.
Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you. I want to make sure that the discussion about the infrastructure money, that's what you were sharing with us, Ms. Dean.
There's a lot of different funding out there. There's both discretionary funding and then there's formula funding that gets funneled by Congress through the direction of Congress to your state DOT. But there's both funding that ALDOT has, and then there's funding that the Department of Transportation has the ability to solicit for applications and make awards for based on different merit criteria.
Okay, and did you? I just, if I sound repetitive, I apologize.
No worries.
I would tell you that, but was there any discussion regarding the applicability of it, being able to get it? Did you share that out, what we would need to do?
Well, there's going to be a lot of different grant programs. It's going to be based on what the project is and what you're looking to accomplish. Chances are, if you have an interstate project, you would likely be eligible for quite a lot of discretionary grant programs. If you have a safety project, if you have a community connectivity project. One of the things that I would be happy to share with the person who helped me set up this meeting is there's a really great resource. FHWA has a bipartisan infrastructure law website that allows you to look through the different resources. But there is a new component that the department has put forth called Navigator, and it's a website that's meant for smaller communities or really anybody who's trying to understand. There's a large universe of discretionary grants out there. We're looking at billions of dollars. And so given what you're looking for, is there a bike trail project? Is there a sidewalk project? Do you have a railway crossing program? And what are those opportunities that you could go after? Who do you seek assistance from? And what kind of federal requirements you need to look into? So we're in the process of standing some of those resources up, but some of them are available to you now. I would be happy to share links to those things.
If you would do that, I would appreciate it. Madam Chairman?
Yes, sir. Yes, Senator.
I'm sure with all of us on here, it's easy for her to just work with you on it. Will you make sure that we get that information?
Yes, sir. Our clerk Vaughn and I will assure that you get that information and share it with all the committee members. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Dean.
Yeah, no problem. And I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to tell you guys, I'm sure a lot of you have worked with them, but just in case you're unaware, Federal Highways has the benefit of a division office in every single state. You guys have a division office in Alabama. I work with Mark Bartlett, who is your division administrator. I'm sure ALDOT knows them very well. They're also a really great resource. They're on the ground. I can talk to you about high level things, but they can actually talk to you about the specifics. They know your region, they know your projects, they know your areas. So whether you reach out to our division office or you reach out to us, we're super happy to assist you with any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. And if you, Madam Chairman, if you would share also her contact information, well, we could reach out. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Samay, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we look forward to continuing a dialogue with you later.
Thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to go back to the agenda. I have a couple of members that have some questions. Senator Elliott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't see Director Cooper here today, unfortunately, so I have a few questions for clarifications of the waterway project. Tony, I don't know if that's you or Ed or both, or if y'all want to draw straws or how you want to handle that.
I guess if you don't mind, ask us the question.
Fair enough. It is about what is contained on ALDOT's website as far as the project versus what has been let so far and what the connection plan is for that project long term.
So the website, Senator, you want me to?
Yeah, if you don't mind. And while you're going up there, my understanding is that the project that was let terminates at County Road 4 and East-West County Road and does not continue the balance of the already ALDOT acquired right-of-way all the way up to connect to the Beach Express as is planned and has been indicated in previous public hearings. Is that accurate?
The project that was let is the first portion of the project to build the bridge. Our plans were always to do a project in multiple phases. And so this is simply the first phase because will take the longest time to address. But that bridge project does currently end at County Road 4.
Okay, well, in my time in Montgomery, I have certainly learned to embrace incrementalism, so I can understand that. My concern, however, is that terminating at County Road 4 is very unlikely in my mind to achieve the stated goal, ALDOT's stated goal, of removing a significant portion of traffic off the Highway 59 Holmes Bridge due to the lack of connectivity if you're terminating at County Road 4. I think it's very important in order to achieve AlDOT's goal of moving that traffic off of 59 and onto this project is to connect quickly to the Foley Beach Express through the right-of-way that's already been acquired. Have you worked out the connection to the Foley Beach Express as it pertains to right-of-way acquisition, the Spike Strip, et cetera, south of County Road 8?
We have begun negotiations and discussions with the county on that, and those are ongoing right now. So.
Okay. So the state has right-of-way acquired up to that connection point, but has not solidified the actual connection point to the Foley Beach Express.
We're still negotiating with the county on how to best accomplish that goal.
Okay. I am concerned that as projects matriculate slowly, I am concerned that we are about to spend a whole bunch of money, of state money, on a piece of a project that in the foreseeable future is unlikely to achieve the efficacy that we have both hoped for of alleviating traffic on Highway 59 because it is an incomplete project.
Well, we believe that it will help alleviate some of the congestion on State Route 59.
Are there studies that indicate that a terminus at County Road 4 will achieve that?
I don't know that we've done a study to determine that because I don't know that that's the long-term overall way that will occur. It will be dependent on how these discussions with the county mature. So
I only asked that question because you said you believe that it will do that. I was wondering if you were basing that on a study.
There have been some studies done, yes, that talk about origin and destination studies of how traffic is moving. I'm in a bit of a disadvantage here. I need to be careful about what I say because there is a lawsuit filed in this situation, and I don't need to stand up here and say some things that could be part of something that may go on related to that lawsuit.
I understand, and I anticipated that answer, and it's one of the reasons my questions are addressed to the portion north of County Road 4 and AlDOT's intention to complete that portion, which is not the subject of suit right now.
But part of the suit that they filed is consistent with what you're asking. And so, what I can tell you, AlDOT has said many times, the bridge company would not commit to taking on additional traffic capacity on this route. And so, additionally, they wanted a 50-year prohibition on any new bridges being built over the Intercoastal Waterway. Now, this means that they would have had full monopoly control over moving traffic onto and off of the east end of the island well into the 2070s, regardless of growth or need in that area. And AlDOT just did not believe that was in the best interest of the people of the state of Alabama to give a foreign bridge company control over access on the north end of the island.
I'm aware of the talking points, Mr. Austin, and I understand them. I will also say that I think that if we look at why that 50-year moratorium was out there, it will be because, in my mind, the department was asking for cash, and a lot of it, up front, and that it was only reasonable for and I'm not going to sit here and defend the bridge company.
Let's not litigate this.
Yeah, you're definitely getting off into some things that I'm just not going to be able to
understand.
discuss.
I understand, but you were reading the talking points, so I'm responding to the talking points just a little bit there. But I think when we talk about why that 50 years was there, it was because there was a large amount of cash requested up front, and that was what was driving, I think, that moratorium. The Spike Strip issue that I was asking about and how it interplays with the connection, that road to the Beach Express, there was litigation about that some time ago. Has that been solved?
Are you aware of the litigation he's referring to, Tony? I don't know that I am. Are you talking about the right-of-way issue?
The right-of-way issue as it connects to the Beach Express and then litigation surrounding the tri-party agreement and the Spike Strip. I mean, this is going back division engineers ago. I think Vince Calmetti was still the division engineer then. I'm just curious. We've bought all of this right-of-way to get, and it spent $20 million to get all the way to the Foley Beach Express. Do we have the ability to connect to it?
We believe we do, yes.
Do you know if that litigation has been is there an outcome to that litigation?
So if I remember right, the initial suit was in favor of the state, and then there was an appeal to it by the other side, and then there was a resolution that was going to not require that to continue, so it was dismissed, I believe, right? It's been dismissed.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the latitude.
All right. Any
Thanks, Ed.
other questions of the membership? All right. This has been a longer meeting than we normally have, but we had a jam-packed agenda. I thank everybody for their participation and the committee for their commitment of time and the questions. This meeting is adjourned.